The late summer of 52 BC in eastern France did not begin with the clash of steel, but with a suffocating silence that hung over the valley of the Ouse and Osirane rivers. As the sun beat down on the parched Gallic earth, the Roman statesman and general Gaius Julius Caesar stood upon the heights, watching a massive column of over 80,000 Gallic warriors retreat toward the hill fort of Alesia. This was not merely another skirmish in a decade-long conquest. It was the final, desperate gamble of a continent trying to break the Roman yoke. Gaul was in the throes of a massive, unified revolt led by Vercingetorix, a chieftain of the Arverni, whose strategic brilliance and organizational skills had managed to unite fractious tribes that had spent centuries at each other's throats. Caesar, now 48 years old and acutely aware that his political rivals in Rome, chief among them Pompey the Great, were waiting for him to fail, knew that his entire legacy depended on what happened on this limestone plateau. He brought with him an army of nearly 55,000 men, including 10 battle-hardened Roman legions and a vital contingent of Germanic cavalry mercenaries, whose superior horsemanship had already turned the tide of battle in the Vingent Valley just days prior. Vercingetorix had established his fortified encampment at Alesia, believing the hilltop's 500-foot elevation and the natural protection of the surrounding rivers would make it an impregnable bastion. He relied on a scorched earth policy, having already burned 20 towns in a single day to deny the Romans forage and grain, but he had spared Alesia at the desperate pleading of the Beturiges tribe, who regarded it as the most beautiful city in Gaul. Caesar, observing the formidable defenses, made a decision that would define Roman siege warfare for 2 millennia. He would not throw his men against the walls in a repeat of his recent disaster at Gergovia. Instead, he would build a prison for an entire army. He ordered his legions to begin a work of engineering so vast it seemed to defy the laws of nature. The Romans first constructed an 11-mile line of inward-facing fortifications known as a Contravallation. This ring consisted of a 12-foot rampart, reinforced with wooden towers every 80 feet and preceded by 2 massive trenches, one of which was diverted from the local rivers to be filled with water. However, Caesar's plan faced an immediate and terrifying complication. Before the Roman grip could be fully closed, Vercingetorix dispatched his remaining cavalry under the cover of night with a single, desperate command: return to your home tribes and raise every man capable of bearing arms to march on Alesia. Caesar realized that within weeks he would be trapped between the 80,000 men inside the city and a relief army that could number in the hundreds of thousands. His response was a stroke of strategic madness and genius. He ordered a second, 14-mile outer line of fortifications to be built facing outward, known as a circumvallation. Between these 2 walls, his army would live, fight, and eat, transformed into a garrison that was simultaneously the besieger and the besieged. To defend this double ring with limited manpower, Caesar turned the ground itself into a nightmare. He instructed his men to dig rows of lilies, camouflaged pits containing sharpened, fire-hardened stakes, and stimuli, barbed iron spikes hammered into short logs and hidden beneath the grass. These were preceded by 5 rows of sippy, interlocking branches stripped of their bark and sharpened to a point, creating a gauntlet of mutilation that ensured any Gallic charge would lose its momentum long before reaching the Roman pilum. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere inside Alesia turned from defiance to horror. With grain supplies dwindling and the relief army nowhere to be seen, a council of Gallic leaders met to discuss their survival. It was here that Critognatus, a nobleman of the Arverni, delivered a nefandous speech, suggesting that to maintain the strength of the warriors, they should sustain themselves on the bodies of those useless for war. While the Gauls did not stoop to such cannibalism, they reached a decision equally tragic. Vercingetorix ordered the useless mouths, the women, children, and elderly of the Mandubi tribe who lived in the city, to be expelled, hoping Caesar would show mercy and let them pass. But Caesar, understanding the cold mathematics of siege warfare, refused. He posted guards to ensure they could not pass his lines, trapping thousands of innocents in the no man's land between the city walls and the Roman trenches. There, under the watchful eyes of their husbands and fathers on the ramparts, they slowly perished from starvation and thirst, a testament to the brutal resolve of both commanders. The climax arrived in early October when a massive Gallic relief army, reportedly numbering over 250,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry, finally appeared on the hills southwest of Alesia. The besieged Gauls inside the city erupted in joy, filling the trenches with fascines and preparing for a coordinated assault. For 2 days, the Gauls tested the Roman lines, launched night attacks, and showered the ramparts with arrows and stones, but the Roman defenses, overseen by capable legates like Mark Antony and Gaius Trebonius, held firm. On the 3rd day, the Gauls identified a weak point in the northwest corner at the base of Mont Ray, where the Roman lines had to follow a gentle slope that gave the attackers the advantage of high ground. Vercassivellaunus, a cousin of Vercingetorix, led 60,000 hand-picked warriors on a secret night march to the reverse slope of the mountain, waiting for the signal to strike. At noon, the assault began. It was a chaotic, multi-front struggle. Vercingetorix attacked the inner lines, while the relief army swarmed the outer walls, filling the trenches and pulling down the palisades with grappling hooks. The Roman line at Mont Ray began to buckle under the sheer weight of the Gallic horde. Caesar, observing the battle from a high vantage point, moved reserves with the precision of a master chess player, sending Decimus Brutus and later Gaius Fabius to bolster the threatened sectors. Finally, as the situation became critical, Caesar donned his distinctive purple cloak so that his troops might recognize him and gain heart. He personally led 4 cohorts and a portion of the Germanic cavalry into the thick of the fighting. In a brilliant tactical maneuver, he ordered the rest of his cavalry to secretly exit the fortifications and circle the mountain to strike the Gauls from the rear. The sight of the purple-clad general and the sudden appearance of the Germanic horsemen at their backs broke the Gallic spirit. The relief army, exhausted and terrified of being surrounded, turned and fled, suffering a massive slaughter as the Roman cavalry pursued them into the night. Vercingetorix, watching the destruction of his last hope from the citadel, realized the war was over. The following morning, the king of the Gauls put on his most beautiful armor, groomed his horse, and rode out alone through the gates of Alesia. He rode in a circle around the seated Caesar before dismounting, stripping off his weapons, and sitting in silence at the feet of his conqueror. It was an act of surrender intended to save his remaining men from further slaughter. Caesar, showing the same calculated pragmatism that had guided the siege, spared the Aedui and Arverni tribes to use them for future political leverage, but distributed the rest of the captives to his soldiers to be sold as spoils of war. Vercingetorix was taken to Rome in chains, where he would languish for 6 years in the Mamertine prison before being strangled as part of Caesar's grand triumph. The victory at Alesia broke the back of Gallic resistance forever, transforming a collection of independent tribes into a Roman province and providing Caesar with the wealth and military prestige he needed to eventually cross the Rubicon and change the course of Western history. While Alesia stands as a monument to Roman engineering, it serves equally as a reminder of the terrifying lengths a general will go to when his back is against the wall and the fate of an empire is at stake.